0 to $1 million ARR in 3 years is what we did.
I love it. I love it.
You can get to $1,000 MRR or maybe even 5,000 or something without product market fit. To get to 10K MRR requires just a lot of.
How much faster today, if you were starting, do you think you could get to these types of numbers?
Like knowing what I know now, I think I could go back and do it in half the time or less.
You were bootstrapped, right? So you were doing a lot of this or all of this to some degree.
Right. So then you either need to be good at organic traffic, paid traffic, or
I've got to ask this question because it's near and dear to my heart in terms of the white glove concierge service. At what point did that not scale?
95% of these trials that come into software products, they just never achieve the outcome.
When do you think you shut that off? I've scaled Groove to 5 million ARR with 5 people, bootstrapped. I've been working on not only Groove, but also 2 other companies. The goal is to build a no fluff community where founders can build alongside me as I scale these 2 SaaS companies in real time. You'd have access to my playbooks, contractors, strategies. This is the accelerator, the community, the course that's raw, that's authentic, where you build with us. We build with the same playbook together.
Welcome to the 0 to 10 million ARR podcast. Today, we're sitting down with the founder and CEO of Kit, Nathan Barry. Nathan's journey to building a multi-million-dollar SaaS business started with freelance web design, selling iPhone apps, and authoring books on design. In 2014, he committed to focusing full-time on Kit, then earning just $1,000 a month, and grew it to over $42 million in annual recurring revenue with $4 million in annual profit. And he did this in less than 10 years. Outside of work, Nathan is a video blogger, an angel investor, a traveler, and he even bought a ghost town in 2018. In today's episode, we'll unpack Nathan's path from side project to multi-million-dollar business, and we'll dive into the strategies and decisions he used to go from 0 to 10 million ARR and beyond. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, so, I just want to kick it off by asking, that at the start of your journey, I've listened to many of your interviews. So I'm not wanting to be redundant and cover too much ground that I'm sure you've covered in other podcasts. You've talked about your early days at Kit, at then ConvertKit, and how you grew it from 0 to that critical $1 million level. But I think what's so interesting when I look at your barometric chart is that for a while you were like hovering around that $1,000 a month or $2,000 or $3,000 for like a year, maybe over a year, and then all of a sudden in I forget what month it was, but all of a sudden there was like a tipping point, it seemed, and you went from 50,000 a year to $1 million in like 9 months. So I wanted to zoom in on that little growth, that like hockey stick like growth. What changes at that point do you feel like drove that change from just like this up and down kind of level recurring revenue to all of a sudden that hockey stick like growth in those early days?
Yeah, so it came down to a conversation with Heaton Shaw, who is actually who introduced Alex and I to each other years ago. Well, Alex, would that be 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's probably 10. Crazy.
It's been a while, maybe longer, maybe 11 years. And so I was talking to him, and ConvertKit is what the product was called at the time. We've since rebranded to Kit. Was I think about $1,500 a month in revenue. And it had declined from a peak of 2,000, because everyone talks about like, maybe they're in e-commerce or digital products and like, oh man, I wish I had recurring revenue. And like, that's so amazing. No one ever talks about churn. Like churn is actually pretty brutal in SaaS. And so we declined from that peak. And I had this conversation with Heaton where he's like, look, you're 18 months into building ConvertKit. It's not successful. You should shut it down and move on to something else. Like you've been successful with other ventures. I think you will. If you just change your focus. And then he was like, or if you want to take this seriously, like double down, go all in on it, but don't do this, like build a product on the side and expect big results. And so took me like another 5 months to take that advice. But I ended up deciding to go all in and double down on ConvertKit. And so I hired, instead of just contractors, I hired like a full-time founding engineer. I focused on direct sales instead of content marketing. And then I started doing like concierge migrations where we'll like do anything to switch a customer over. And the last thing is I narrowed down and chose a niche. We were very, very broad, like email marketing for people who need email marketing. I don't know. And so we ended up saying email marketing for professional bloggers. And those things combined allowed us to build a better product, really target a specific customer, reach them with cold outreach, do sales calls, migrate those customers, and just like very gradually stack those wins. And so it's not that the like 0 to 1 million ARR is hard. I think the hardest chunk is actually probably the 1,000 to 10,000, because you can get to $1,000 MRR or maybe even 5,000 or something without product market fit. And you can probably get beyond that too. But like to be able to get to, and this you have a big audience, to get to 10K MRR requires like just a lot of hustle. At least that's what it was for me. So January 2015 was when it was like, all right, we're doing this. We had grown slightly, so we were 2K MRR. And by June, we were 10K MRR. And that was just pure hustle, direct sales, all of that, which was weird for me because I come from the content marketing world. And so I thought, you sell, like the best way to sell a product is at reach and at scale. And I don't think that's true at the really small stage. I think that kicks in later.
Let me ask you a question, Nathan. Today, in today's environment, everyone's saying that, you can go from 0 to 1 easy and super fast. How much faster do you think you'd be able to, and it's a really, really tough question, but how much faster today, if you were starting, do you think you could get to these types of numbers?
Like doing it over again?
Yeah. So like if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm watching this and I'm saying, geez, like everyone's saying that I can get to 1 million ARR within 12 months. It took Nathan X amount of time when he started 12 years ago. Do you think you could surpass the execution in those early stage today? Again, tough question.
Yeah, with what I know now, absolutely. I think that 0 to 1 million ARR in 3 years is what we did. Now, almost all of that was in the third year. And so, I think that's totally doable. I'm the person though, everyone's saying like, this is easy, AI makes it easier, audiences makes it easier. That is all true. I'm the person that's going to be here saying, this is the hardest thing you will ever do in your entire life. And like go in with that expectation. Like I would not even consider touching a software product of any kind unless I knew that I was going to spend 3 years of my life on it no matter what. Right? Like you're not even allowed to evaluate, is this working? Other than like a slight change in strategy or that sort of thing for 3 years. And I think that if you go in with that mindset, you're going to be way more successful, and you go in with that amount of time and that level of resilience. So yes, absolutely. Like knowing what I know now, I think I could go back and do it in half the time or less. And then you talk about relationships, right? Like audiences that you have, like that's where if you're comparing, your first software company to someone else's third, your like scrappy $10,000 to $50,000 that you have in a budget to get this things built to someone else's like deep network of friends and their own personal capital and relationships and all of that. Like it's just very, very different things.
Yeah, it's so important for the founders to hear that, so that they don't get discouraged. Right. 6 months in, 5 months in, they're like, shit, I don't have product market fit. I don't know. Like, there's so many variables that happen, and I forget what the percentage was, but however many startups fail before product market fit is because of exactly that. They can't get through that trough. You got to have the time. You got to have the grit to get to that potentially 3-year mark in order to see some results.
One, I think people often mistake like time overall for actual like units of effort applied. Like an example of this is my wife and I were both into ballroom dancing in college. And so I had done it for like 4 years or 5 years at that point. That a friend of mine got into ballroom dancing, and he pretty quickly, I want to say in like 6 months, maybe or less, he was like on the same level that I was. And I was like 4 or 5 years in. And I'm like, wait, what is up with this? But I was doing it once a week and he was doing it 3 or 4 times a week. He was learning with like intention and purpose, and I was hanging out with friends and, doing it gradually. And so those first 2 years, if you think of like units of effort that I put in the first 2 years, I probably put in more units of effort the next 3 months than those first 2 years combined. And so you have to factor that in. Like, oh, I've been trying to learn this thing. I've been trying to learn to play the piano for 5 years now. It's like, have you? Really? Or I've been building this software company for 5 years now and it hasn't really taken off. And it's like, could someone else put in that same level of effort in 6 months? And then if so, like, you don't get to say like, oh, I tried on this idea and it didn't work. I guess I got to move on. It's like, you didn't try.
Mm-hmm. One follow-up question too is you talked about the niche that you chose, which is creators, and you've done a fantastic job with really dominating that email marketing market. Talk to us about that process. Was it like, hey, I just want to eat my own dog food, or was there a lot of customer development up front where you said, hey, this ICP is going to be the one?
Yeah, so I did a lot of customer development on this idea of a better email tool for people who did content marketing, right? Like, Alex, that's how you and I first met, right? Is you were early in this content marketing in the software space world, and I was like, hey, you got this traffic, like, do you how could we send it to email sequences? Like, is there enough of a product here? So I think that validation is really, really important, and there's probably 50 plus calls along those lines, maybe 100. And then, so that's one thing where you're like feeling out, okay, where's the responses to this? What do people say? Like, oh, I already use this other tool, that kind of thing. But for me, I didn't want to pigeonhole the product into one area and say, oh, it's just for these people. Because it could be used by an author, a YouTuber, a software company. It could be used like, I don't know, a plumbing company who's like, hey, we want to build out our online presence. Like, why not? It would work for that. A nonprofit and everything else. And so as a founder, it's the easiest advice to give and the hardest advice to take of you should focus on a niche. And so when we actually finally did that, not only did it help narrow the product, but it also, most importantly, it gave me exactly who to talk to. Because I wasn't like, oh, I'm talking to this wide range of people. It was like, no, I can list out every single paleo recipe blogger on the internet, right? I can find the men's fashion bloggers in New York and I can get on calls with all of them. And then it allows you to do this like echo chamber strategy where I don't have giant names to drop, but if I'm going in a very narrow niche, I can be like, oh, this person uses this person. Like one thing, we had a lot of fitness blogs early on, particularly in this one niche of like high intensity interval training. And someone said to me, like, it feels like everyone on the internet is switching to ConvertKit right now. And I looked and our stats were like 11K MRR. So like objectively, everyone on the internet is not switching to ConvertKit in this moment because it add up to more than $11,000 a month. But it was just like, oh yeah. I mean, we're getting a ton of traction. Tell me about it. Who's switching? And she starts listing off the people in her mastermind group, the people that she follows and all of that. And it's like, well, yeah, you just listed 4 people in this tiny little circle of 20 that I've been targeting. And that made it feel like everyone on the internet is switching to this. But I just found one successful customer and drew a slightly wider ring around them and said, hey, who do they know? Who, if I came into a room and dropped their name, would it mean something? And it's not that I'm trying to go into random rooms. It's like, no, I'm trying to, like, this is all I got. This is my social proof. So let me find the most relevant audience to have that in. And then they'd be like, oh, that person uses it? Okay, I'm in. I've learned everything I know from them.
Yeah, no, sorry, Tom. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I think you were at the forefront of vertical SaaS, so it was cool to see. It takes guts. It takes guts to go vertical. So obviously you're proving it. So
It worked out.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, and to that point, Nathan, so that was like early on those choices were made, and I think contributed to that significant growth early on. But then it didn't really subside. And I mean, looking at your charts and just expanding them out, it's been pretty consistent across time, which is pretty remarkable. Like it's not like you've ever had like a significant dip. So if I want to zoom in on that 1 to 6 million, 1 to 5 million, because you were able to do that in about a year's time after you hit 1 million, if I'm correct on my charts.
Yeah. So basically, what happened is really it was direct sales entirely from 1 to 10, 1,000 to 10,000 MRR. And then about 10,000 is where we started to feel a little bit of momentum. Like a few people would make referrals, like word of mouth started to show up a little bit. And so like that accelerated that flywheel of direct sales. And then probably about 30 to 40,000 MRR, which was 3 months later. Then we introduced webinars and affiliates. And that, which is really a word of mouth type process, but that accelerated it so much more. So in 2015, it was 2,000 to 10,000 in June, 10,000 January, 10,000 in June, 25,000 in September, 100,000 by that next January. And then the next year was really about, okay, how do we scale this momentum? Primarily, sales, word of mouth, and affiliates, and just run the same process over and over again. And that took us from 100,000 to 500,000 MRR in another year. So yeah, it was 2 years it was 2 years to 2,000 MRR, and then 2 more years to 500,000. That was just absolutely insane. Now, the thing in that is we've just been steady ever since. We've put up 4 to 5.5 million net new ARR every single year ever since. So we didn't hit if you look at, it's important to look at numbers not just in the totals or not just in the percentage change, but also in the net new. And so that's something where we've just been really steady from then on. And that's, we can get into the journey from 10 million plus, but that's really how it's been.
And to that point, because I do want to drill down into some of this, you identified some growth levers that were working early on. You were bootstrapped, right? So you were doing a lot of this or all of this to some degree. I know you had the background as a blogger. You were comfortable with webinars, I think, to some degree because of what you'd been doing in the writing and self-publishing and design space. You just you took what you already knew, what you already had learned, and turned it around and used it for ConvertKit at the time. And then to grow it from there, it was about hiring key people to take over those spots of what you were doing. Is that correct? And basically just say, hey, we need these key hires to actually scale this?
Yeah. So if you look at the webinar strategy, it's something that I still think works to this day because most people are selling software through basically 2 extremes. Either direct sales, so like one-to-one, we're on a call, I'm like, we're talking through it. And you need to do that because that's where you learn what the objections are, who the players are in the market. Like you can learn, if you do 100 sales calls for your software product, you will learn an insane amount. Like I would do 100 sales, I would rather have 100 sales calls than 1,000 free trials come in. Like that would be more valuable for positioning, product feedback, everything else. So that's one side of it. But then the other extreme that everyone goes to is they say, no, SaaS should be sold through a marketing website that should have a homepage, a features page, a pricing page, and a start trial. And like those are 2 ridiculous extremes. And I think that webinars live right in the middle. You get to really talk about the story and the why and the benefits that you have and case studies and all this in like an animated 3-dimensional way that like you've got to be really good. Like your website has to be dialed in for the copy and the messaging and positioning and everything to match what a webinar does. Mm-hmm. And even then you don't get feedback. The webinar, you get feedback right there in the chat in real time. People are like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Tell me more about that. The website, they just hit the back button and they never come back and all of that. So I think that webinars are absolutely an amazing way to sell software and something that everyone should do.
So are your webinars one-to-many demos?
It's a mix of both.
Okay.
That was something early on doing webinars. I was thinking it's not worth doing if I don't get enough people. And my friend Andy Drish was like, well, how many is enough? And I was like, I don't know, 50 people to show up live, 25 to 50, something like that. And he's like, okay, hey, will you give me a demo of ConvertKit? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, well, and he goes, so that's worth doing? I was like, yeah, a demo of showing the software. He's like, okay, if me and 3 of my friends were there, would that be worth doing? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, but a webinar to 5 people would not be worth doing? I'm like, fair enough. Understood. And so I thought of it that way of like, I would do this one-on-one, so why wouldn't I be willing to do it for 5 people? And then what I did is probably a combination of teaching something specific, like marketing automation or how to get your first 1,000 subscribers or something like that. and then really trying to integrate the product and show here's how ConvertKit makes it easier to do. And then, having an offer, and like, if you sign up now, we'll migrate you for free, or there's something else that's time limited in that as well. Like, sign up before this time period ends, and then we'll get you an extra 2 months free or something like that.
Sure. So like a little like middle, bottom, and then bottom of the funnel.
Yep.
So yeah,
Exactly.
makes sense.
And you still have to attract people to webinars, right? And so then you either need to be good at organic traffic, paid traffic, or affiliates, right? Those are really the only things. And so some people will say like, oh, how do I want to use webinars, but that's just an education and a conversion mechanism, right? You still need a way to fill that top of the funnel. And so you're either good at one of this, you're good at driving traffic yourself, buying traffic, or partnering with people to get the traffic, which is the approach that we took. And that works better in some industries than others, right? Like if I was making something, I don't know, like I used to, when I ran a web design business, I'd go to the Chamber of Commerce and go to these meetups and that sort of thing. And like if some local business is really, really happy and they tell all of their local business owner friends, it's like 5 people, maybe. Definitely in my case of going after, professional bloggers and creators, when Pat Flynn told all of his business owner friends, it was like 10,000 people. And so there are definitely advantages there. But these days there's influencers in every single niche.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've got to ask this question because it's near and dear in my heart in terms of the white glove concierge service. At what point did that not scale? When do you think you shut that off?
Oh, we still do it to this day.
Okay. I love it.
I mean, I would never turn that off.
Okay.
I think that you have to make it so easy to onboard to your product. Now, there's a time that I stopped personally doing it, and that was probably about 50K MRR was when I did the last migration. But I'd still be involved in sales processes or that sort of thing. It's relatively straightforward to hire people, build better things for it. But I just think that you have to drive adoption at all costs.
At all costs. Yep.
And switching is the biggest thing. And I talked to so many founders who they're like, yeah, I would love to do a concierge onboarding or something like that. But like our average revenue per user is only $50. And I'm like, well, I can tell you what, kits today is still at $62, right? Like we don't make money on this, but we're trusting that these customers are going to stick around for a long term. And then the compounding growth is going to kick in. And it's worked out very, very well. But an individual migration is absolutely not profitable, and don't try to make it profitable.
Yeah, it's a sales and marketing loss leader. Yeah, you're losing money. I love it. I love it. Yeah, we're doing something very similar with a new company that we're launching, and it's more and more apparent that, especially it's an AI product, it's more and more apparent that education and onboarding with AI is so important. It's almost more important than the actual solution itself. So
I think so, because we're in this stage with AI where everyone has access to something like between 10 and 100 times the number of tools that they could actually learn and implement. And like, I believe you that, we could list off 1 of 10 AI tools or whatever it's possible to solve my exact problem with that. I don't know how to do it. I don't have the time to do it. I don't know where to send my employee to, And so if you come in and say, hey, we'll solve this for you and implement it. Oh, by the way, our software will also manage it for you long-term. Like, that's amazing. So like Brennan Dunn has this company called Right Message that his method and all of that for segmentation, and building an audience and driving sales and all of this is absolutely amazing. And Right Message is a great product, and I'm an investor in it, but it has not gotten traction because it's too complicated. People don't understand how to do that. And he did not really get traction. I don't know what MRR capped out at, but something in the 10 to 100,000 a month range. And what flipped the switch for him is he said, you know what? I'm going to keep working on improving the product and all of this. And they did this huge rewrite and all of that. But at the same time, I'm going to start an agency that's like, oh, we just do all this for you. And the agency, if Right Message is $300 a month, the agency was $30,000 for an implementation. And they would do all of this, and they would do it through Right Message. And so now they have a $300 a month product. The product seems super, super cheap because you just paid Brennan, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to build all this out for you. But he got recurring revenue. He got another user, and he was able to fund a bunch of development with that. And now they're just relaunching Right Message with their rewrite, everything they've learned, and I think it's going to be much better as a consumer product. But he's gotten a ton of progress and scale through this, like, I am the expert, let me do it for you. And I think that's everyone's talking about like, oh, you could automate more with your help desk or with your SDR process or whatever through AI. And it's like, okay, I believe you, but do it for me. And so I think in that case, from a help perspective, like a help desk perspective, of like coming in and saying, we will do all of this for you. It's a done for you solution. It's only $500 a month ongoing or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah, Alex and I have been talking about that, so that's pretty validating to hear, Nathan.
I think
we've been debating it the last month. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And you can decide whether you want to charge for that service or not. Like Brendan's taking the approach of, being paid tens of thousands of dollars for it. Well, no matter what you do, I would position it as we're going to get you to this amazing end state. And, normally, and we're the experts at it. And normally we would charge $10,000 to do it, but we're willing to do it for an annual commitment to our software. Right. Or, so, if you're willing to commit to spend this, $500 a month or whatever, then we'll throw this at, $10,000 or $20,000 thing in for free. But the key is you have to create the outcome, because 95% of these trials that come into software products, they just never achieve the outcome. And it's not like, oh, don't worry, there's a huge market, like we'll get the next one. It's like, no, you forever have someone out there who's like, oh man, I tried that product and I love where they were at, or like their intention with it, but it just never really delivered. And best case, they only tell 5 people that. Worst case, they're forever out there when you have a future evangelist going, oh, this is amazing. They're like, I don't know. I tried it and it didn't work for me, even though they tried a version from 2 years earlier, right? And so I think you just have to have this like force of nature level of attention to each new customer to say, we are going to make you successful, even if it requires spending an extra 40 hours to get this, up and running. So long as you're doing it for real businesses, right? You'll get tire kickers and whatever else.
Right.
Yeah, to that point, Nathan, it's funny because you mentioned, again, one of the things that you continued to do was the white glove concierge onboarding and again, making sure that the user is actually reaching that outcome or that end state that you are setting for them at the outset of that conversation that you're having. Like, this is where we're going to get you. What else have you continued from 10 million and beyond, and what things have changed for you? Because now you're just dealing with, you're at such a high level now. This is so much higher than you were before, obviously competing with the other big names in the space at this point. So how have things evolved or changed since you hit the 10 million and beyond?
Well, actually, I think a big part of the reason that it's not that we stalled out, right? Because we consistently put up for that 4 or 5 million net new ARR every year. And you do that for enough years, and it's like, okay, this is a big business. But we haven't really accelerated things and like continually accelerated that growth rate. And I think it's because we moved on from the things that were working. I think there's a tendency as a founder to like find something that works. You build up a channel and you're like, all right, this is working really, really well. Now let's it'll keep doing its thing, and then we'll move on to the next thing and get that working well. And then we move on to the next thing. Then we come back and we're like, hold on, what's going on with this first thing? Why did our affiliate channel die out? Why are direct sales no longer working? It's like, well, that hasn't been your focus. And the team that you hired, you either thought you fully trained and you didn't, or someone ran it really well for a while and then they left and it stalled out because the person, all of these reasons. And so I think what happens is you look for the next, instead of doubling down on what really worked, you look for the next thing. And so for us, this last year has been, year and a half has been on rebuilding things that used to work really, really well. and going back to the basics. We used to chase like all the fancy growth levers and whatever else. And it's like, no. And we're back to direct sales. We're just doing it at a larger scale. Concierge migrations, 100% still there. Our rule is just, hey, if you're a $100 a month account or above, so that's like 5,000 subscribers, then we'll do this for you for free. And then affiliates and webinars. That's something that we're scaling up a ton, especially with the rebrand from ConvertKit to Kit. There's a lot of people that don't know that yet, right? And so if we can get out there, really talk about our unique value, mention that we've changed names, talk about our creator network and these other things, our app store, things that we've launched, that's what we're really, really emphasizing. But what I'm doing differently this time is instead of like a one-off process or pure hustle, like I mentioned, you have to have this force of nature level of effort to make something happen. I believe that. The thing that I believe differently now is you have to define a flywheel and then measure it consistently and have someone on it and have the accountability and the reporting to make sure that it keeps compounding over time rather than it can get neglected and drop off.
That's awesome. How do you feel like the landscape has changed in that regard? Webinars, affiliates, has that evolved or changed over time? Or do you feel like basically what worked 10 years ago or 8 to 10 years ago is going to work for you today? Or have you had to adapt and evolve that at all?
Yeah, I'll know better in a year because we're still relatively
We'll get you
early.
back on the podcast then.
Exactly. I did check with a lot of people because I was like, okay, this worked before, would it work again? And, it seems like the webinar, like capturing attention in that way really peaked in probably 2020, 2021 with the pandemic. And then I think people were kind of tired of online training and all of that for a little bit. Like, just let me outside. I don't even care. I don't want to be in front of a screen anymore. And then it seems like things are coming back great. Like I basically talked to a whole bunch of creators who are actively doing webinars and saying, hey, what is this still working? And they're like, yeah, it's a very big channel for us. Because at its core, it's like, can I attract a bunch of people together to learn something? Can I deliver enough value that they're excited? And then can I position my product to solve a problem that they think they need? And you're like, that never really changes. And so you just have to break down like, okay, in this process, where's the actual bottleneck? Are we no longer able to attract like traffic? Are people not attending? And we basically validated each step and said, no, this, from a first principle perspective, this should still absolutely work.
That's awesome.
Really cool. And one thing that you haven't mentioned, Nathan, and I know that you do it, and we've done it now for the last, when we were introduced to each other almost 12 years ago, right, from Heaton, there was this and Tom, you were big on the blogging, and there was this transparency blogging thing that myself and Joel at Buffer were kind of doing at the time, which is pretty unique. Now they're coining it like this founder brand, where the founder, whether or not they're being, typically they are being transparent, but they're sharing their wins, their fails, their learnings in full transparency. I noticed that you didn't even mention kind of founder brand or building in public. How much do you think that has affected your trajectory over the years? Because I know that there's this like X factor when someone says, "Oh, show me the ROI," right? Show me the results. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think it's been huge for me, right? Like we made our metrics public when we were at 3K MRR, and they're still public to this day. They might not always be public. Like at some point, it's not useful for other people to follow a future part of the journey. We'll see. So it was very early on in that. And then obviously I came from the content marketing, blogging, creator world. So that's like in my DNA. So I don't think it's something that I'm saying every single person must do this. But I guess I have two thoughts of it. One is a minimum viable brand. And then the other is thinking about what an audience actually means. So first we talk about a minimum viable brand. This is something that I think everyone should have. And all it's for is increasing the conversion rate and like your luck surface area on every interaction. And a minimum viable brand just consists of going on all your signing up for all the major social media platforms. They'll pick one that you're going to focus on, but be on all of them. Have a good headshot. Have a bio that clearly explains this is who I am and the value that I provide. I work in Facebook ad buying and I specialize in helping SaaS companies go from 10K to 100K MRR, right? Like that's a pretty good bio. I know who you're for. And then what I think you need is you need a long form podcast interview where you are interviewed as the expert and you're talking through, in our fake example, right? What does it take? What's your journey? Then what does it take to scale software companies from 10K to 100K in MRR with Facebook ads? Like what lessons have you seen across your clients? All of that. So if someone's trying to decide, do I want to work for this person? Do I want to hire them? All of that, they can go down this rabbit hole and be like, oh, all right. I just found myself watching 30 minutes of this interview. And then the last thing that you need is, I think you need 10 to 15 short form video clips that are you positioned as the expert talking about specific things. And the way that I would do it is I would go into an in-person podcast studio, plug for Kit Studios where I'm sitting now. If you're a Kit customer, you can come record here for free, and have someone else interview you. So sit there in the other chair and then just say like, hey, Nathan, what's the biggest mistake that you see creators make? And then I answered, I'm like, the biggest mistake that I see creators make, so I'm restating the question in it, and is boom, 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 right? And I talk through it. That's a perfect little clip. And we cut out, Alex, if you're the one asking me questions, I'm just cutting you out of it, right? It's just a real focus on me. And then now I'm building out my LinkedIn, my Instagram, whatever, with this full bio. I didn't sign up to be a full-time creator all the time. But now whenever I'm introduced to someone, they're like, who is this Nathan guy? And they click through and it's like, oh, I don't know who he is, but he seems legit on the internet, right? I watched a couple reels. I got a sense for his expertise. And there's this minimum viable brand. And you could do that in 2 days of focus time, even if you never touch it again. But now I can send DMs on every social channel and get responses because it's like, oh, this person seems legit. And other people can refer to me. People can link out to, there's all of those things. So I'll pause there before we get into the other side. But I think a minimum viable brand is absolutely crucial for every founder.
Yeah, I love that. I think we'll be implementing. We've been doing quite a bit of content marketing, journey-led marketing. But I love that idea of just really zooming in on those specific questions. That specific approach, it seems pretty easy. Because I've heard that too from founders. People who are like, well, I don't want to be in front of a camera. I don't want to have to be producing content all the time, which I think is a pretty common fear or
be a distraction.
Oh, yes.
You get in this situation where you're like, am I building a software company or am I just building a personal brand? And they don't have to, they're not exclusive of each other, but both take time. And if you're spending 10 hours a week creating content for a personal brand, that's 10 hours that you're not spending on direct sales calls or product feedback or something else. Now, I would argue that brand will help you get in front of more customers who will help you have better calls and all of that. So it brings me to my other little soapbox, which is about an audience. And everyone's like, well, first in the software world, the joke used to be basically if the founder that you invested in, within VCs, if the founder you invested in starts building a personal brand, then you might as well just write off the investment. And I listened to Gary Tan on a podcast, who's president of Y Combinator. And he was had completely different tune. He's like, no, personal brands are one of the most valuable things that a founder can do for all these reasons. So even the SF tech world, who's been as cynical as can be on personal brands, is now no, there's a huge amount of leverage here. And the reason that there's this leverage is just imagine, don't think of an audience as tens of thousands of people. Think of an audience as the right people paying attention. So whatever goal you have in life, there is a group of people, whether it's 10 or 100, that if they were paying attention to you, it would make it radically easier to achieve that goal. Now, for me, I said I'm trying to grow a software company to $5,000 a month in recurring revenue within 6 months. And that was a very specific goal. And I put it out there on the internet. And people like Amy Hoy and Heaton Shaw and Brendan Dunn and others were like, seems like a cool journey. Seems like a nice guy. Yeah, I'll get on a call with him. Sure, I'll help him rewrite all his like homepage copy. I'll introduce him to these people, right? Like 10 of the right people paying attention is absolutely huge. And so if you think about, okay, an audience isn't a ton of people, it's just the right people paying attention, then how do I consistently get in front of those people? And it might be as simple as saying, hey, yes, I have my board for my software company, but I'm going to create a board of advisors, a very informal group, and I might send out my board update not to just to the 4 people who are my shareholders and like on my board of directors, but maybe to this group of 25 people who are on my friends advisor list, and I'm telling them the journey that I'm on, where I'm struggling, and I'm staying top of mind, right? That's an audience of the right people paying attention. Or if you're saying, hey, I am selling this product into this very narrow niche, right? How do I get the right people paying attention? Well, okay, become an expert in that niche. And that can make a huge, huge difference, right? And you are in the conversations and do that really, really well. And that's totally different than what I would say most people do, which is where they build a crowd. And a crowd is all about view counts, the overall stats, how many followers you have. Like in a crowd, more is better. In an audience, more might not be better, right? A crowd is like people that are watching you for entertainment, some level of education, but they might just be, they don't really care if you succeed or fail. An audience is people who are in your corner cheering for you. And when you hit that distinction, then you're like, okay, as a founder, an audience of 1,000 people might be life-changing for me. Whereas a crowd of 10,000 or 100,000 might not move the needle in my business in any way. And that really helps you think about the types of content that you create.
I love that. That's awesome. Wrapping up here, Nathan, with maybe just a final question, kind of putting you on the spot. I'm just curious. So like if you were us right now with Helply, I mean, you've kind of answered this, I think, with all the advice you've given, but like what's the singular growth lever that you would pull? Or for any new startup maybe, but just zooming back in on us for fun.
I would promise a very specific outcome that you can create. And I would put out this bold claim of what you're doing in, customer experience, customer service, and say like, we will transform A to B, right, in your business, and do it through a concierge process. And I would just say like, we'll create this outcome for you, and whether you charge for it on the front end, don't charge for it on the front end, like it doesn't really matter. Play with both versions of it. And then I would not care at all about self-service SaaS or that sort of thing early on. And I would make it all about getting to the 10 companies that you've made these like transformations for. And then, all done for you. And then I would just keep productizing that in the software. And then I would like that minimum viable brand that you make. For me, it'd be all about the transformations. And this really hands-on. You're telling case stories, not case studies, and you're talking about the outcomes created and like what it meant for the founders and the customer experience team leaders and all of that. And I think that's huge, and that's way more important than like getting to that first bit of revenue.
I love that. That's great advice.
Absolutely love that. Yeah, I mean, like literally, we this morning we're just talking about this. So it's cool to hear your thoughts, Nathan, here. And yeah, I mean, we couldn't thank you enough for joining us here. It's been an absolute blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always good to catch up. We've been in the same circles for a very long time, and you both have been very early supporters of ConvertKit. So I appreciate it so much as we continue this whole journey as Kit.
And still users, which is pretty wild. Like maybe one of the longest subscriptions I've ever had.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you, Nathan. For everybody who's listening, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, share it with other founders looking to scale their businesses. And you can learn more about Nathan and his work at nathanberry.com and kit.com. Nathan, thank you again for joining us. And to everyone listening, keep building, keep scaling, and we'll see you next time.